I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would have to check their bank statements with a calculator in one hand and a knot in their stomach. But there I was, sitting at my mother's kitchen table in Dayton, Ohio, staring at 3 years' worth of transfer receipts while she stood by the sink with her back to me, shoulders shaking. "Mum," I said quietly, "please sit down." She didn't turn round. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white against the chipped formica. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows of the house I grew up in, the house that needed new gutters, a roof repair, a furnace that didn't sound like it was dying every time it kicked on. All things my money should have fixed. My name is Brian. I'm 38 years old, a registered nurse at Miami Valley Hospital. And for the past 3 years, I've been working 60-hour weeks so my mother could live with dignity. After Dad died, her world got smaller. Arthritis had twisted her hands into shapes that made opening pill bottles nearly impossible. Her pension, $847 a month, barely covered property taxes and utilities. So I made a promise at his funeral, standing in the same cemetery where 3 generations of our family are buried. She'll never want for anything, not while I'm alive. $2,000 every month, sent to my cousin Brandy's account because Mum didn't trust online banking and Brandy lived close enough to hand deliver cash. Seemed perfect. Family helping family, the way we were raised. "Mum, please." She finally turned. Her face was blotchy, eyes red-rimmed behind her glasses. "I don't understand, Brian. Why would they?" Her voice broke. "Brandy used to braid my hair when she was little. I babysat both those girls every summer. I felt something hard and cold settle in my chest. Brandy and Courtney, 34 and 31, my Aunt Patricia's daughters. We'd grown up together, backyard barbecues, Thanksgiving dinners, graduations. Courtney was the maid of honor at my wedding before my divorce. Brandy helped me move into my apartment when Sarah left. I need to call them," I said, pulling out my phone. "Brian, no. Mum, they stole $63,000 from you." The number hung in the air like smoke. She sank into the chair across from me, and I saw her truly fragile for the first time. Not just old, but breakable. Small. My mother had always been the strong one, the one who held our family together after my father's construction accident, who worked 2 jobs to keep me in community college, who never complained. I dialed Brandy first. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hey, Brian, what's up?" Her voice was bright, casual. I could hear music in the background, laughter. "I'm at Mum's house," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm, too flat. She just told me something interesting. A pause. The music got quieter. "Yeah," she said, "she's been getting $250 a month from me." Silence. "Brandy, I send you $2,000 every month for 3 years. Brian, I can explain. Where's the money?" Her breath hitched. "It's not. Look, Courtney and we've had some expenses, okay? We were going to pay it back, $1,750 a month. For 3 years." My hand was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. "What expenses could possibly? You don't understand what it's like." Her voice rose, defensive now. "You live up in Cincinnati with your hospital job and your benefits. We're barely scraping by down here. Courtney's got 2 kids. I've been between jobs. So you stole from your aunt, from a 72-year-old woman with arthritis." "We didn't steal, we needed it more right then, and we figured Aunt Dorothy was doing fine on what she got." I hung up. My hands were trembling. Mum was crying softly, her twisted fingers covering her face. I drove to the Dayton Police Department that same afternoon. The building smelt like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. A tired-looking officer named Derek took my statement, but his expression told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. "Mr. Henderson, I understand you're upset, but legally speaking, you gave this money to your cousin voluntarily. There's no written agreement, no contract stipulating she give your mother the full amount. It was implied, isn't legally binding. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Look, I'll file the report, but unless your mother was legally declared incapacitated or there's evidence of coercion, this is a civil matter. You'd need to sue them. I left the station feeling hollow. On the drive back to Mum's house, I called my ex-wife Sarah. We'd been divorced for 2 years, but she was still the person I called when the world stopped making sense. They won't do anything, I told her. The police basically said it's my fault for trusting family. Oh, Brian, her voice was soft. I'm so sorry. $63,000, Sarah. I've been eating ramen and picking up extra shifts, and she's been living on pocket change while Brandy and Courtney. I had to pull over. My vision was blurring. I saw Courtney's Facebook last month. She was in Myrtle Beach, posted pictures of her kids on the beach, said it was a much-needed family vacation. I actually liked the photo. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I don't know, but that wasn't quite true, because even as I sat there on the shoulder of Route 35 watching cars blur past, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to fight, not because I wanted the money back, though God knows I needed it, but because my mother deserved better than to spend her last years knowing her own family had betrayed her. The next morning, I met with a lawyer named Michelle Rodriguez in downtown Dayton. Her office was small but organised, certificates on the wall, a photo of 2 kids on her desk. She listened to everything, took notes, then leaned back with a thoughtful expression. There might be another angle, she said. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Your mother is over 65. She has documented physical disabilities, and they knowingly deprived her of resources intended for her care. It's a felony in Ohio under certain circumstances. Hope flared in my chest. Can we prove it? Do you have the bank transfers? Every single one. And your mother, would she be willing to testify that she was expecting the full amount and that their actions caused her hardship? I thought of Mum's kitchen, the space heater she ran because she kept the thermostat at 60 to save money, the generic medications, the groceries that consisted mostly of bread and canned soup. Yes, I said. She will. The case moved faster than I expected. Michelle contacted the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office, and within 2 weeks, Brandy and Courtney were each charged with theft from an elderly person. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Chen, told me the evidence was damning. They're facing up to 18 months if convicted, she said during a meeting at the courthouse. But given that it's a first offence and they're cooperating, we'll likely offer a plea deal. What kind of deal? Restitution, probation, community service. Maybe some jail time, but probably suspended if they comply with everything else. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt sick, because 2 days after they were charged, my Aunt Patricia called me. I hadn't spoken to her since this all started, hadn't known what to say, but her voice on the phone was raw, broken. Brian, please, they made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But they're my daughters, Courtney's kids, your second cousins. They're asking why their mum might go to jail. Please, isn't there another way? I closed my eyes. Aunt Patricia, they stole from Mum for 3 years. I know, and I'm not excusing it. I've been sick over it. But prison, community service, I understand. Paying it back, absolutely. But her voice dissolved into sobs and I had to hang up because I couldn't breathe. That night I sat with Mum in her living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching it. She was knitting something she could still do despite her hands, though it took her 3 times as long as it used to. They want a plea deal, I said. She didn't look up. What does that mean? They'd have to pay the money back. Do community service. Probably at a nursing home or something similar. No jail time if they complete everything. Her needles kept clicking. Click, click, click. What do you want, Mum? Finally, she stopped, set the knitting in her lap, looked at me with those tired, kind eyes that had seen me through scraped knees and broken hearts and my father's death. I want my family back, she whispered. The plea hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in mid-December. I took the day off work, drove down to Dayton through freezing rain that turned the highway into a grey blur. My windshield wipers beat a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Guilty, guilty, guilty. But guilty of what? Exactly. Them for stealing, me for not checking sooner, all of us for letting money become more important than family. The Montgomery County Courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown, the kind of place that made you feel small just walking through the doors. I found Mum sitting on a wooden bench in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, wearing the navy dress she'd worn to Dad's funeral. Her hands were folded in her lap, those twisted fingers laced together like she was praying. You didn't have to come, I said, sitting beside her. Yes, I did. Amanda Chen, the prosecutor, appeared from around the corner with Michelle Rodriguez. They were talking in low voices, legal pads tucked under their arms. Amanda's expression was all business. She'd been pushing hard for the maximum penalty allowed under the plea agreement. 6 months of community service at a nursing home, 5 years probation, full restitution with interest, and a permanent criminal record. It's a good deal, Amanda had told me last week. They're getting off easy, frankly. Most judges would throw the book at them for elder exploitation. But looking at my mother's face now, I wasn't sure who the deal was good for. The courtroom doors opened and people started filing in. I saw them immediately, Brandy and Courtney, standing with their lawyer near the front. Brandy's blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, wearing a plain grey sweater. Courtney looked worse. Her eyes were swollen like she'd been crying for days. Behind them sat Aunt Patricia and Courtney's 2 kids, Tyler and Kayla, 7 and 9 years old. The kids looked confused and scared. Tyler saw me and waved. I felt something crack inside my chest. We all stood when Judge Ronald Martinez entered, a man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He settled into his chair, reviewed some papers, then looked up at Brandy and Courtney. Miss Thompson, Miss Henderson, you've both entered guilty pleas to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honour, they said in unison. Courtney's voice broke. The judge reviewed the terms of the plea agreement. The restitution, $63,000 plus interest, to be paid at $500 per month each for the next 7 years. The community service, 480 hours each at Oakwood Senior Living Centre, the probation, the permanent record. With each term, I watched Courtney's shoulders hunch further forward. Then Judge Martinez did something unexpected. He looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Henderson, you're the victim in this case. I'd like to hear from you before I accept this plea. How has this affected you? Mum stood slowly, gripping the bench in front of her. Michelle whispered that she didn't have to speak, but Mum shook her head. Your Honour, she paused, collecting herself. I raised those girls, I changed their diapers, taught them to bake cookies, drove them to soccer practice when their mama was working. And when they did this, when I found out, her voice wavered, I felt like my heart was broken all over again, like losing my husband a second time. Courtney made a sound, a sob she tried to muffle. Brandy's face was chalk white. But, Mum continued, and I felt my stomach drop, they're still my family. They made a terrible choice, a cruel choice, but I don't want them destroyed over it. I want them to understand what they did. I want them to face people like me, people who are old and forgotten, and remember that we're human beings who deserve dignity. That's why I think this community service is right. Not punishment, education. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. He turned back to Brandy and Courtney. Do either of you wish to address the court? Brandy stepped forward first. Her hands were shaking. Your Honour, there's no excuse for what we did. None. I told myself at first that Aunt Dorothy was fine, that she didn't really need all that money, that Brian made good money and wouldn't miss it. But those were lies, selfish lies, and every month that I took that money, I knew it was wrong. I knew, and I did it anyway. She turned to look at us, at me, at Mum. Aunt Dorothy, Brian, I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. I stole from you, I looked you in the eye at Thanksgiving and Christmas and lied. I betrayed everything our family is supposed to stand for. And if it takes me the rest of my life to make this right, I will. Courtney went next. She could barely speak through her tears. My kids are here today because I wanted them to see this, to see what happens when you make selfish choices, to see their mum face the consequences of being dishonest and cruel. I used that money for vacations for things we didn't need, and the whole time Aunt Dorothy was struggling. Brian was struggling, and I justified it because she stopped, wiped her eyes, because I'm a coward, because it was easier than getting a second job or cutting back or asking for help. Honestly, I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Courtney crying and Kayla whispering, "Mummy," in a small, frightened voice. Judge Martinez accepted the plea. He explained that any violation of the terms would result in immediate jail time, that this would follow them for the rest of their lives, is that financial crimes against the elderly were taken seriously in his courtroom. Then he dismissed us. In the hallway afterward, we stood in awkward clusters, me and Mum on one side, Brandy and Courtney with their lawyer and Aunt Patricia on the other. Between us was a chasm that felt impossible to cross. Tyler ran up to me suddenly, wrapping his small arms around my waist. "Uncle Brian, are you still mad at my mum?" I looked down at his face. He had Courtney's eyes, my grandmother's chin, 7 years old, innocent, scared. I knelt down to his level. "Tyler, your mum did something wrong, something that hurt people, but she's going to work very hard to make it right. Do you understand?" He nodded seriously. "She cries every night." Behind him, Courtney had her face in her hands. Aunt Patricia had her arm around Brandy, who was staring at the floor. And my mother was watching all of them with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she did something that stunned me. She walked across that hallway right up to Courtney and Brandy, and she opened her arms. "Come here," she said softly. Courtney broke first, falling into Mum's embrace like a child, sobbing into her shoulder. Brandy followed, and then Aunt Patricia, and suddenly they were all holding each other in a knot of grief and relief, and something that looked almost like forgiveness. I stood there, frozen, Michelle beside me, looking equally surprised. "Mum," I said quietly, "you don't have to." She looked at me over Courtney's head. "Yes, I do. They're family, Brian, and family means you don't give up even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." The following Monday, Brandy and Courtney started their community service at Oakwood Senior Living Centre. I know because I drove there on my day off, curious, unable to stay away. I found them in the activity room. Brandy was helping an elderly man named Kenneth with a jigsaw puzzle, her hands gentle and patient. Courtney was reading aloud to a group of residents from a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She was a good reader, her voice clear and expressive. The residents were listening intently, and one woman, probably in her 80s, had tears running down her face. I watched from the doorway for a while, unnoticed. The director of the facility, a woman named Angela, appeared beside me. "Those your cousins?" she asked. "Yeah, they're doing good work here, really connecting with folks." "That one," she nodded at Courtney. "She spent an extra hour yesterday helping Margaret write a letter to her estranged daughter. Wasn't on the clock, just stayed because Margaret needed her." Something loosened in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, the possibility. Christmas came 3 weeks later. Mum insisted on hosting dinner, like she always had, even though I offered to do it at my apartment in Cincinnati. Even though the idea of sitting around a table with Brandy and Courtney made my stomach turn. "We're family," she said firmly when I protested. "This is what we do." So I drove down on Christmas Eve with 2 bags of groceries and helped Mum prepare. The house smelled like ham and dinner rolls and the pine-scented candles she'd been burning since Thanksgiving. We didn't talk about the case, the money, any of it. We just cooked together like we had when I was a kid. And for a few hours, it almost felt normal. Aunt Patricia arrived first, bringing sweet potato casserole, then Brandy, carrying a store-bought pie and looking terrified. Finally, Courtney with her kids, Tyler and Kayla, bouncing with excitement despite everything. We sat down to eat at 6 o'clock. The table was crowded, 8 of us squeezed around furniture meant for 6. Mum said grace, her voice steady and clear. Lord, thank you for this food, for this family, and for second chances. Help us to forgive as we have been forgiven. Amen. Dinner was quiet at first. Tyler chatted about his Christmas list. Kayla showed me a drawing she'd made of a snowman, but the adults were careful, polite, dancing around everything that mattered. Then Mum set down her fork and looked at Brandy and Courtney. I need to say something, she announced. The table went silent. What you did hurt me deeply, and it's going to take time for me to fully trust you again. But I want you to know that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt you. And because I believe people can change. Brandy's eyes filled with tears. Aunt Dorothy, let me finish. Mum's voice was gentle but firm. You're going to pay back that money. You're going to serve your time at that nursing home, and you're going to live with this mistake for the rest of your lives. But you're also going to have the chance to be better, to do better. That's grace, girls, and I'm giving it to you because someone gave it to me once when I needed it. Courtney was openly crying now. Thank you so much, I promise. I know, Mum said simply. I believe you. I sat there watching this unfold, this impossible act of mercy, and I realised something. My mother was stronger than I'd ever given her credit for, not despite her vulnerability, but because of it. She knew what it meant to need help, to struggle, to fall short. And that knowledge had made her kind instead of bitter. Later, after dessert, I found myself outside on the porch with Brandy. The night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the street lights. We stood side by side, breath fogging in the December air. I don't know how to make this right with you, she said quietly. I thought about that, about the $63,000, the betrayal, the lies, about Tyler hugging me in the courthouse and Mum opening her arms and Courtney reading to elderly strangers with tears on her face. You're already starting, I said. Just keep showing up, keep being honest. That's all any of us can do. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I saw your bank account, when I was taking the money. I saw how little you had left each month after you sent it, and I took it anyway. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Then you'll have to learn, I said. Same way I'm learning to forgive you. Same way Mum already has. We stood there a while longer, not quite reconciled, but not quite enemies anymore either. Somewhere in between, somewhere human. It's been 8 months now since that day in Mum's kitchen when the truth came. Out! Brandy and Courtney are halfway through their community service. They've each paid back $8,000 so far, sometimes in chunks of $500, sometimes less when money's tight. It'll take years to fully repay it, but they're trying. Mum's doing better. I still send her money every month, but now I transfer it directly to her new bank account, one she finally agreed to open. And I visit twice a month instead of once, staying the weekend, fixing things around the house, just being present. Brandy got a steady job at a medical supply company. Courtney went back to school for a nursing assistant certificate, inspired, she said, by the residents at Oakwood. Aunt Patricia calls me every few weeks just to check in, to apologise again, to tell me how proud she is that I fought for what was right while still leaving room for redemption. And me, I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make over and over again. Some days it's easy. Some days I see Brandy's Facebook posts about going out to dinner and feel that old anger flare up. But then I remember Mum's voice, family means you don't give up, even when it hurts. Last week, I got a card in the mail from Oakwood Senior Living Centre. Inside was a photo of Brandy and Courtney with a group of residents all smiling. On the back, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Your cousins are angels. They make us feel seen. Thank you for sharing them with us." I put the card on my refrigerator right next to a photo of Mum from last Christmas, her face lit up with something that looked a lot like peace, because in the end, that's what this was all about. Not money, not punishment, not even justice really. It was about remembering that people, even people who hurt us, even people who fail spectacularly, are still people, still capable of change, still worthy of grace. And if my mother, who had every right to be bitter and angry and unforgiving, could choose mercy instead, then maybe I could too. Maybe we all could.